Hi, my name is Emma Lipscomb, and today I will be presenting Metro Collision Project, Best Trauma-Informed Drama Therapy Practices for System-Impacted Populations. So my research question is, what are the best trauma-informed practices to support the needs of system-impacted teens and adults through the creative arts? So I will be answering this question through looking at theorists, primarily Resmaa Menakem, and my own personal experiences working with teens and adults who have been impacted by the system through the Metro Collision Project and Common Good Atlanta. So the first thing I want to look at is, what is trauma and how does it affect the body? Trauma is a response to being in a dangerous situation for too long. The brain is essentially rewired to be on high alert to threats and protect itself from any potential danger. But this will happen even if danger is not present. So the brain is rewired to want to protect itself from anything that could cause harm, but a trauma response happens even when the brain is not in danger. And contrary to what many people believe, trauma is not primarily an emotional response. Trauma always happens in the body. So trauma can have effects far beyond emotional effects. It's a rewiring of the way the brain processes information, which has a huge effect on the body. And this can be seen in the way that the effects of trauma can also be found in health conditions, including depression, anxiety, anger disorders, OCD, PTSD, and early research suggests that an overflow of adrenaline into the bloodstream during a traumatic experience can cause the brain structure to change and potentially trigger autoimmune diseases. And this is according to an interview with Sarah Yaw. So these experiences can affect the way a person is able to go through life. They may experience fatigue, mood disorders. This affects more than just your mental health, but every part of your life. And trauma can also be passed down genetically through DNA. So trauma experienced by someone's parents or grandparents can be passed down generations and generations. And Menakem even acknowledges that this trauma can be passed down through cultures, and eventually a traumatic response can start to look like a culture. So you might be wondering, how does trauma relate to system-impacted individuals? Well, people of color are incarcerated at a disproportionate rate. Black Americans are incarcerated in state prisons at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans, and Latinx Americans are incarcerated at 1.3 times the rate of white Americans. So racialized trauma is huge in America. It's passed down through generations and generations, where minority populations have been oppressed for so long that trauma is inflicted upon them and thus passed down generations to generations, and then people of color are disproportionately incarcerated. So this can cause a huge racial trauma within the system. Racialized trauma is prevalent in system-impacted populations. It's also impacted in the white people who are incarcerated as well, and white people who may be working with incarcerated populations. The trauma of inflicting oppression on these groups can also be passed down, causing discomfort and wanting to talk about it. So it's huge and it's prevalent in working with all trauma-impacted populations. Additionally, crimes are not committed in a vacuum. Circumstances and trauma are what lead to people to be incarcerated. No one just goes and commits a crime. Trauma happens whether you've grown up in impoverished situations or there's violence at home. This all leads to why people become incarcerated. So I want to look at drama therapy practices for working with system-impacted populations. So when you are working with these groups, it's so important to be aware and understanding of students' comfort levels, both mentally and physically. You want to encourage students to step out of their comfort zone, but don't be upset or disappointed if a student's not there yet. Trauma impacts every part of somebody who's been traumatized lives. So you want to be understanding if a student's just not ready to share something vulnerable, or if they don't feel comfortable with doing something physically. You also want to watch your body language in proximity to students. So standing over someone's shoulder may mean nothing to somebody who hasn't experienced trauma, but that can feel threatening and scary to somebody who's been in a traumatic situation. So you always want to watch their body language and watch your own body language and make sure that you're avoiding anything that could be potentially triggering. And if that happens, understand that it's nothing personal. It's their own experiences that can lead to a trauma response. You also want to validate student work and use positive reinforcement. As I mentioned before, trauma can impact all kinds of health conditions and self-esteem. So you want to be able to validate student work and help them understand that things that they create are valuable and that they are worth it, and their self-esteem does not impact their work. And additionally, for white people engaging in this work, you want to break habitus, according to D'Angelo. So that comes down to that racialized trauma of white people not wanting to engage in this work because it's uncomfortable. So you have to be willing to learn about other people's experiences in a non-judgmental or defensive manner. And you can do this through what Medicaid calls breath and body practices. So you want to work on your body and use breath exercises to settle your body when faced with challenging experiences. It's not helpful to anyone to run away from discomfort. You want to acknowledge it and work through it to reground yourself and be present in the moment so that you can be present for your students. So next, I want to look at working with youth. When you work with youth, it's important to acknowledge that they're looking for guidance, acceptance, and validation from you and those around them. That's things that all young people want. They're trying to find their place in the world, so you want to be able to help them there. The best thing you can do is first set professional boundaries. Not only are incarcerated youth a protected population, so you don't want to spread their information, but it's also important for kids to be able to establish boundaries that helps them grow and understand themselves within those boundaries. You're there to help them, but you also want to be there to guide them. So you want to find ways to relate to and validate their work. This will help them develop agency in their own creations. You want to meet them where they are and encourage natural impulses and interests. So if you have a student who loves to sing, a student who loves to rap, encourage that. That's part of their creative process. And that's already something that they feel comfortable expressing themselves through. So allowing them to use a medium that is already comfortable for them will help them feel more comfortable to share and work through difficult experiences. It's another important thing to give them individual tasks. This allows each student to feel a sense of inclusion, where each are given an individual voice which completes the whole, according to Finneran et al. So if you have a student who likes to create music, allow them to write music and then work with a student who likes to sing. This allows them to appreciate each other's work while being able to share their own work. All of them will feel that they've contributed to the whole, and that creates a positive, creative, and accepting community. And finally, you want to keep a running awareness of their reactions. You may have students one day who are bright and loud and involved, and the next day they're withdrawn, and they don't want to be a part of that. That is most likely a trauma response or something else happening in their life that's caused them to disengage. So you want to find ways that you can keep track of their reactions, see if maybe they want to come out of their shell, but also respect that they're probably going through something. So you just want to be aware of that, as well as if anything is making a student very uncomfortable, it may cause an outburst. You just always want to keep track of what's going on in the room so you can adapt to make sure everyone is comfortable. And these are all experiences I have had, as well as other theorists have had while working with youth who have been impacted by the system. Next, I want to talk about working with adults. I've noticed adults are looking for self-improvement, a community, and the ability to accomplish something. So like working with youth, group settings are useful. By creating with other group members, clients are invited to break out of a sense of isolation or dependency and pervasive sense of distrust, according to Friedman and McLennan. So trauma is isolating. Trauma makes people feel alone and makes their self-esteem feel not as up to par as it might have used to be. So working in a group helps people break out of that isolation. It helps people realize that they're a part of a community. And when you create a community that's uplifting and inviting, it helps all group members to feel like they're a part of something and create that sense of community that trauma so often takes away. You want to validate work and encourage vulnerability. And you want to offer opportunities to develop new skills and push past limitations students have developed for themselves. While the youth are still learning and growing and figuring out who they are in the world, adults have already established who they think they are and what they can and cannot do. So part of your job when you're working with drama therapy work is to give students an opportunity to push past those limitations. Students may have decided that they're not writers or they're not poets. By giving them the chance to create these kinds of works and validating that the work they're doing is good and impactful allows them to realize that they may be more of a poet or a writer than they thought they initially were. You also want to listen and validate feelings and experiences. Trauma changes the way people react to situations. Certain situations that may not be dangerous may start to feel dangerous, like sharing and being vulnerable. So you always want to listen and validate those experiences. Nothing that they do is wrong. Any experience that they have are valid. So allow them to express those and work through it. If they want to express that they don't want to share anymore, encourage them that it's okay to share and everyone accepts it, but don't push it to a point where they start to feel endangered and uncomfortable. And finally, you want to offer challenges. Adults want to learn new skills and they want to grow. So push them. If they're uncomfortable writing from somebody else's point of view, see if you can push them into that. But of course, respect boundaries. And you also want to make everything feel like you're just sharing where you are. Nothing has to be final, nothing has to be perfect. Everyone is here to share and grow. So with that, I've concluded that there are specific methods that define the best trauma-informed practices to support the needs of system-impacted teens and adults through the creative arts, but most revolve around an awareness of trauma's impact on the body, an ability to acknowledge and work through one's own discomfort, and finding tactics that foster a sense of personal accomplishment and community. So these are all of the works that I've cited in my presentation, and thank you so much.